Japan Station is made possible in part by amazing people like you. If you'd like to make sure that I can keep bringing you more content about Japan, the Japanese culture, and the Japanese language, then consider joining the Patreon over at japankyo.com/Patreon. You can join for as little as $1 a month, and that will get you early access to episodes, plus ad-free versions. I also take one-time donations over on Ko-fi, Venmo, and PayPal. Links are down below.
Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to Japan Station.
Welcome to Japan Station, a production of depakosu.com. This is the podcast where we teach you everything you should know about Japan, plus a few other things. I'm your host, content creator, founder of depakosu.com, and the anime linguist on YouTube, Tony R. Vega. So today we're back with another episode of Japanese Plus Alpha. That's my podcast about the Japanese language. I talk about interesting quirks of the Japanese language, etymologies, slang, stuff like that. And well, today's episode was originally released exclusively for $3 a month plus Alpha tier Patreon members back in the spring of 2021. So it's been quite a while. Here's one update that, well, you'll understand once you hear the bonus section of this episode, but I do recommend the Odd Taxi anime. I finished watching it not long after the release of this episode, and I enjoyed it. I think it probably didn't get as much attention as it should have. It was quite enjoyable. So if you're looking for an anime to watch, well, Odd Taxi is a pretty good one. It's not like a fantasy adventure shonen kind of thing. It's more of a wacky mystery with quirky anthropomorphic animals and a very interesting animation style. But again, I do recommend it. You should check it out if you're into that sort of thing. All right, that's enough of me. Well, no, you know what? Here's one more thing. Don't forget to subscribe. Whether you listen on YouTube or Apple Podcasts or wherever, hit that subscribe button so you don't miss out on future episodes. All right, let's get to the episode. From depakosu.com, this is Japanese Plus Alpha, a podcast about the Japanese language and its various quirks. I'm Tony Vega, and today we're talking about something that I heard in a Japanese radio show. So for more than a decade now, I've been listening to Japanese radio shows. I basically started maybe in the late 2000s, and I started kind of dabbling in Japanese podcasts and radio shows, but I really got into it in the early 2010s. And I found it to be a great resource for practicing listening. And you get to learn about a whole bunch of topics and how you talk about them in Japanese from various different kinds of voices, women, men. You can listen to news and comedy shows, and there's tons and tons of content out there that you can even find on YouTube, but also Apple Podcasts and all those kind of places. So if you're interested in really practicing your listening and taking it to the next level, I highly recommend checking out radio shows. It's hard at first, but if you stick to it, you'll get used to it and you will learn so much. But that's a little bit off topic. So nowadays, I just don't have enough time to listen to a whole bunch of Japanese radio shows. So I basically only listen to one. And that one is called Bakusho Mondai Cowboy. So this is a comedy show, and it's hosted by Tanaka and Ota-san from the comedy duo Bakusho Mondai. I really do enjoy those guys, and I really enjoy this show. A lot of the humor in the show is rather blue, I guess you would say, like risque. So if you're not into that sort of thing, then maybe you won't want to listen to that show. But if you're okay with kind of, blue humor, then go check it out. So the vast majority of this show is different little segments where they ask listeners for submissions. So they come up with these premises for these segments, and then listeners will submit jokes and funny stories related to these segments. And one of these segments that they unveiled recently was inspired by an interaction that Tanaka, one of the Bakusho Mondai guys, had with his oldest daughter. Tanaka's oldest daughter is in junior high. I believe she's a first-year junior high student. So that means I think she's around 13 years old. And so she's a teenager and she sometimes comes up with her own original slang, or maybe it's just slang that's popular among her group of friends. And so when Tanaka's daughter uses some of these words, it confused him and he didn't know what they meant. And so then that led to them coming up with this segment where they ask listeners to submit funny original slang that nobody really understood. And anyway, so Tanaka was telling this story about one interaction that his daughter had with his wife. So his wife said one day to his daughter, "Oh, I'm going out shopping. Do you want to come with me?" And then the daughter answered with this.
デパコスならやだよ。プチプラなら行くけど。
depakosu nara yada yo, puchipura nara iku kedo. All right, so what the heck does this mean? All right, so I have to admit, this sentence kind of threw me for a loop a bit when I first heard it, but Tanaka goes on to explain it, right after he says this and what it means and what these nouns mean, because it's really the nouns that throw you off if you don't know them. The other parts of the sentence are well, just typical other parts like yada means like no, or I don't want to, or something like that. Nara is a conditional, something along the lines of if or something like that. So, but anyway, we're not going to get too much into the grammatical side of things. We're going to focus on the nouns. Now, these two words, depakosu and puchipura, these are words that are widely known. I don't think everybody knows it, obviously, as evidenced by Tanaka's confusion when he first heard this, but younger people probably understand it for the most part. So anyway, let's break these down. And I think this is going to give you some flashbacks back to episode 10 when we talked about 4 Mora words. And if you don't know what that is, well, go listen to that episode. The short, simple explanation is that it's any word that has 4 Mora in it. And a Mora, for the sake of simplicity, we're just going to say it's one of these like one hiragana kind of thing. So depakosu. In this case, it's katakana, but it's, 4 letters. Depakosu. All right. So what the heck is depakosu? Well, it's made up of 2 different words smashed together and shortened to create this 4 Mora word. Depato. All right. Depato is department store in Japanese. So you chop off the long a and the to, and you end up with depa. And then what about kosu? Well, that comes from cosme, and cosme comes from cosmetics. So we're talking about department store cosmetics, all right? So in Japan, like I think in many other countries, in the US, for example, if you go to a department store, oftentimes, you will have, I think it might be in the first floor, but maybe not necessarily, you have a really nice cosmetic section, and a lot of times that is where you get the expensive stuff, like the really like high-end stuff. I don't know, like Dior or I don't know, fancy like other stuff. I'm sorry, I don't know cosmetics, so I can't give you too many examples, but I'm sure you probably know what I'm talking about. When you walk in the department store, you see a whole bunch of different areas where they have these little stalls and they're selling like high-end cosmetics. So depakosu, that is for the most part what this is referring to. Let's jump over to the other noun in this sentence that is kind of confusing, and that is puchipura. All right, so puchi comes from the French word for small, right, which is petit or something like that. I'm sorry if I'm not getting the French pronunciation perfect, but I think you know what I mean, right? In English, we often would just say petite, right? I think that is the Englishified version of petit, right? So in Japanese, you say puchi, all right? So there's a whole bunch of puchi somethings in Japanese. Puchi is a pretty commonly used word. So we have puchi, and then we have pura. Pura comes from puraisu, all right? Puraisu comes from price, as in like the cost of something. So again, this is a 4 Mora word. You're smashing 2 things together, and you end up from puchi puraisu to puchi pura. This, as you can probably kind of decipher from these 2 things being smashed together, puchi and puraisu, means something that is a small price, right? Basically cheap. So within the context of this sentence, what the daughter is saying, all right, is puchipura is referring to cheaper cosmetics, right? The kind of stuff that you might find at a pharmacy, a drugstore, right? There's, of course, a lot of these, like Matsumoto Kiyoshi, I think is what it's called, right? There's a lot of different pharmacies and stuff around Japan, and you can go there and they have little cosmetic sections, and typically those are going to be a lot more affordable cosmetics than what you might find in one of these high-end department store cosmetic sections, right? And so what the daughter was saying is, after the mother asks, do you want to come shopping with me? The daughter said, if you're going to the department store, I'm not interested in those kinds of cosmetics, but I am interested in the cheap stuff. All right. And the implication there is, like if you're going to the department store, I don't care. I'm not going to go with you. But if you're going to pass by the pharmacy, then yeah, I'm going with you because I want to check out some of that affordable cosmetic stuff. All right. And now I'll just briefly explain the grammar in that sentence. Depakosu nara, if, yada. All right. Yada yo. Yada, I don't want to. I know, or something like that, right? Just no. And then puchipura, right? What we said, cheap cost, cheap price. Iku kedo. Iku means go, and then kedo in this case means something like but or though. So again, if you're going to the department store, not interested. But if you're going to the pharmacy to look at the cheap stuff, then yeah, I'll go with you. All right. So depakosu puchipura. All right. Two words that I think most people are really not gonna be able to use much, but it is nevertheless really interesting. And I always love finding these little examples of these four mora portmanteaus, right? Of these words that are composed of two words being smashed together to result in a whole new, sometimes confusing four mora word. So that does it for this episode. I will be talking about another little interesting discovery that I had related to an anime involving a walrus, but that is going to be in the post-outro Patreon exclusive section. So if you're a patron, stay tuned. If you're not, well, hey, thank you for listening and see you next time on Japanese Plus Alpha. Welcome to the bonus section, and today we're talking about a walrus taxi driver, actually. If you're an anime fan, you might know what I'm talking about already. But recently, an anime started airing. And actually, as of the time of this recording, it's still airing. It hasn't ended yet. But it's called Odd Taxi. And it's about a walrus taxi driver. So the show is set in basically a version of Japan that is populated by anthropomorphic animals. And there's all kinds of different animals. There's a gorilla doctor and an alpaca nurse and a whole bunch of other animal people. But the main character of the show is this guy named Odokawa Hiroshi. And he is a taxi driver. And all of these different characters have, well, yeah, in some way their name is inspired by the animal that they are, right? And sometimes it's more or less obvious. For example, the gorilla doctor is Goriki, right? That's his last name, and that's inspired by gorilla, right? Goriki sounds a little bit like gorilla. So there you go, right? But this walrus taxi driver, like he's a walrus. He dresses up like a taxi driver. He drives a taxi. He's a walrus taxi driver. His last name is Odokawa, right? And Odokawa, I didn't figure out right away, like, why his last name was Odokawa, right? Because all these other characters, I think all of them probably, yeah, I think all of them, their last name is inspired by the animal that they are. And I couldn't figure out what the connection between Odokawa was and walrus in Japanese, because walrus in Japanese is seuchi, all right? So seuchi does not sound at all like Odo, but Odo does seem to be a pun of the title of the show, right? Odd Taxi. And when you read that in Japanese, it's Odo Taxi, right? Because that's the title. They don't have like a kanji title or anything. It's just a katakana title. So Odo with a little tsu, like a glottal stop in between the o and the do, does sound like Odokawa, right? Which does not have the glottal stop, the little tsu in between the o and the do. So it's a little bit different, but it sounds alike. So there's a pun there, right? I was certain that there was a pun there. But then I was trying to figure out, like, all right, but what's the connection between Odo and a walrus, right? And so then I began to look into this, and it didn't take me long to figure it out. But I ended up realizing that the name Odokawa is a pun on the scientific name for walruses. And the scientific name for a walrus is and I need to read this because I can't remember it, but basically the scientific name for a walrus is Odobenus rosmaris. Odobenus rosmaris or something like that. I'm sorry, I know I'm probably butchering the pronunciation, but the point is that it starts with O-D-O, right? Odobenus. So there you go. Mystery solved, all right? So a totally pointless mystery that was kind of nagging at me ended up being solved. Well, actually, I think I looked this up last night, so just happened to come across it. Just simple curiosity led me to discover the scientific name for a walrus. So once again, Odoka was the name of the character. He's a walrus, and the name of the show is Odo Taxi. So interesting little pun there. I can't recommend the show quite yet. I am really enjoying it so far. It's a really interesting, quirky show. Certainly odd, as the name of the show implies. But even though I'm enjoying it so far, I don't know how it's going to end. And I've certainly been disappointed by anime in the past with their endings. So I don't want to recommend it quite yet. But as of episode 7 or 8, I don't remember what the latest episode is. I've been enjoying it, so maybe it will end up being a show I recommend. But anyway, again, walrus in Japanese is seiuchi. So at the very least, you learned that if you didn't already know it. But once again, thanks for listening. See you next time.